always that discussion, well, which is more important, water or power? Well, water is more important, but if you don't have the power to get the water to your house,
water there, yeah,
away from you, then you're going to say, I really want that energy, right? I want
that's
my
right.
energy. I don't want, and in all my years, when the power goes out, my WhatsApp goes out, my phones go off, within it's instant, right? People are,
Yes.
we become slaves of energy, right? Versus just sitting in the backyard and enjoying the breeze, right? And now I got my phone. Oh, the power's out. Oh my God, my life's gonna end.
Half a day. It's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson, and welcome to another edition of the Innovate Guam podcast where we explore all things innovation, technology, and improvement related to the island of Guam. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack. My podcasts drop at the beginning of each week. Also, be sure to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of each month. All right, we have a great guest for today's podcast episode. Our guest is a longtime member of the Guam Consolidated Commission on Utilities. He's serving his sixth elected term. He also used to be a former chair and vice chair of the Utilities Commission. He's a former senator in the Guam legislature. He is vice president and general manager of Guam Dry Cleaner, bringing a private sector insight into the public forum. He's earned a bachelor's degree from Stanford University and a master's degree from Harvard University. He is the grandson of the late Senator Simon Sanchez, a pioneer in Guam's educational development and namesake of the Simon Sanchez High School. He is a respected voice in Guam's utilities, modernization, energy diversification, and infrastructure resilience. He has recently been appointed to the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation's Board of Directors in the CNMI. He is a bridge between Guam's legacy and its future, an advocate for innovation in education, infrastructure, and energy. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you Mr. Simon Sanchez. Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Buenas, Rob. Thanks for having me on board. And thanks for doing this. It's always good to have people talk about Guam and see what we can do to make Guam and the region a better place to live and do business in.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you carving time out of your schedule for this. So we have a tradition here on the podcast. We start off with some icebreaker questions to kind of get a sense of where your head is at in terms of innovation. So for you, what is your definition of innovation, and what does innovation mean to you?
Good question. So I guess to me, innovation is taking the latest advancements that the world comes up with in technology, in delivery systems, and it's a rapidly changing world which provides things that you never thought were possible, like a podcast on a telephone, and I'm talking to you, right? And then applies it, right? At the end of the day, it's applying the innovation, the technology, the changes, and that emerge from societal change, and seeing how they can be implemented into your business, your family life, all again to make your life better, whether it's for your own family, your coworkers and your businesses, or your community at large. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to participate at all those levels. But there's never a dull moment in innovation. Something new is always being discovered every day, and then they've got to perfect it, and then it gets applied. And our cell phones used to weigh 20 pounds and be this long, and now people stick them in their pocket. The joke was there's more technology on our watch now than there was in what sent astronauts to the moon, and which is probably one of the remarkable revolutions revolutions. And, you know, mankind has gone through many revolutions, right? The latest of which was the Industrial Revolution. Now we're having a technological revolution. And how do you apply these new ideas and thoughts to what you're doing? Because in many ways, I'm in the laundry business. You still need water, a washer, a dryer, and people. But there are innovations you can bring in that make it more efficient. We used to buy all of our equipment from the United States, but now we buy it from China. It's all digital, but it's 1/4 the cost, right? And
Yes.
so, you know, and the world has really become a lot smaller, which ultimately I think is a good thing. But it's a lot. Technology has brought the world closer together. You and I are doing this discussion, and we're not in the same room. We're not even in the same village at this point. And yet we can do this. And if I was in LA, you and I could still do this podcast, right? So, I mean, that's where once you see what's available, then the challenge is how do you apply what's available to make your business better, make your life better. And innovation is that's what innovation really is applying new ideas in a different way to produce better outcomes.
Yes, yes. So tell me, what's your favorite innovation or piece of technology of the last few years?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but I would say that the communication revolution. That, you know, here we are I'm on a phone. I think you're on a phone. You know, COVID was really our generation's World War II. It was a global event that significantly changed the entire planet, right? And lives were even lost, right? And yet our ability, we're doing this on Zoom. Zoom didn't exist really in 2019, right?
Right.
Phones used to be much bigger, now they're much smaller. And I mean, the whole communication revolution and the ability to communicate with people using technology to make it easier to communicate. My grandson opened a business and he opens a gym, but he's got like 100 clients that are off island, and he trains them via telecommunications.
Virtually. Wow.
Yeah, he trains them virtually, and they go to their own gym,
Wow.
but he does their training. And you know, so he's a college graduate in his 30s, and yet he's opened a business, and he's got clients here, but he's got clients that are not on Guam. You know, 30 years ago, you couldn't open if you opened a gym on Guam, your only clients were the ones on Guam, and you couldn't do
Right.
anything on the phone. People had to come into the business, right? And now, you know, we're ordering online. You can do everything online. In fact, you can do everything online, and you can even get hacked online. So even bad people have become innovative. They know how to hack the modern technology. So you know, humans figure it out and apply it, and then you know, over time things emerge that you know, I'm sitting in an air conditioned room in Guam. You know, 50 years ago there wasn't air conditioning everywhere on Guam. You know, you know, I went to high school here, and there was no air conditioning in my classroom, and now, you know, the modern child, oh, there's no air conditioning. Woe is me, the world's ending. I'm never going to make it. Well, you know, you'll make it. It's just be a little bit hotter. But I mean, but that's all. I think it's all to the better. I mean, I'm a glasses half full person. I'm an optimist. I look forward, even when things don't go your way, or you know, I still think, well, each day gives you another chance to address what comes your way that you have no control over, and to do better things with the things you do have control over. I'm a American history fan, and my favorite president is Lincoln, and one of the things he said, you know, we think of Lincoln as this great president who, you know, did all these things, but he commented that it's not so much that I changed events, right, but that they changed me, you know. And his point was, he reacted to things that were, you know, he didn't cause everything to happen. And like all of us in life, sometimes we're just reacting to what happened, right? And
Right.
sort of the parallel to that is that old joke is, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people say, what happened? Right? And you know, we're
Yeah.
all of us are in that can fall into any of those categories at any
Yes.
present time. So, but Yeah, but there's no question. I mean, the whole world is a product of innovation,
Yeah.
for better and worse. Some will say there's some innovations you're not happy with, but generally speaking, the planet we are better. Fewer people die from disease, rampant disease. We've learned how to provide clean water to most places and take away human waste from most places. That wasn't prevalent, 200-300 years ago, and there's still some parts of our planet that it's not prevalent. But generally speaking, we see fewer people dying from disease, and we see more, and we've got way more people on this planet than we used to have.
Innovation leaders, it's your innovation coach, Rob Jackson here. Are you ready to elevate your vehicle fleet operations? Fleet Solutions is an AI-enabled fleet management system. Fleet Solutions provides real-time video, smart analytics, and total efficiency. Keep your people safe and keep your business moving forward faster than ever before. Fleet Solutions, arriving tomorrow, today. Visit thefleetsolutions.net or call 671-988-9748 to schedule your personalized demo and revolutionize your fleet operations today. Looking back on your family legacy, do you consider your grandfather and your father innovators? And how did their legacies motivate you to pursue a career in public service?
Yeah, yeah. My grandfather was either the superintendent of education or the chairman of the board of education for almost 50 years. And he and Agatha Johnston and some other pioneers of education on Guam realized that the most important thing you can do for your people is to educate them. And they started the local school system. And they were doing this at a time when the Navy admiral of the time was the governor of Guam, limited self-rule. It wasn't, we were under security clearance. You couldn't have much of an economy. And yet, like so many of our founding fathers and mothers in Guam, they saw the importance of education, the importance of community, the importance of when society learns, it's better for society to be educated than not to be educated. And then they started by building schools, right? And it wasn't like they had access to millions and billions, right? They started with building smaller schools in Quonset huts. Like George Washington University in Manila started out as Quonset huts. In fact, all the schools were Quonset huts in the 50s. That was the technology at the time.
Wow.
Huts, right? Now you look at the technology, right? Concrete and steel buildings with simulated environment like air conditioners, right? So that's a great example of innovation that started in Quonset huts that now have matured to the new John F. Kennedy School, the Upadu schools that were built, the latest schools that we're building, all emerged from a system that started in Quonset huts without air conditioning.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing when you think about it. So, as we look back on that history of Guam's education system and stuff, what do you think were the pivotal moments in the development of Guam's educational system and leading us to where we are right now? And then where do you think we need to go, more importantly?
Well, we just talked a little bit about my grandfather and his peers, like Agatha Johnston and Mr. Mr. Untalan. I mean, you look at a lot of the schools that are named after local leaders, and those most of them were educators, right? And there wasn't a lot of private sector opportunity on Guam until after the 60s. So you worked for the government, right? And the middle class of Guam, the really came from the government of Guam. There was some entrepreneurship and some commercial development of Guam, and you hear names like Calvo and Nada and those families that Camacho and those families that were more on the business side. But you have a huge history of government because it was in many cases the only place to get a better job, or you worked for the military, the federal government, or you left Guam.
Right.
right? We've got huge
Right.
populations outside of Guam, in America primarily, and many of them have a base from federal government, Washington D.C., or the military, San Diego, right? And those
Yeah.
are that's my training and planning introduced me to the whole idea of central business districts and the idea that all the great cities start around water. And when you look at them, right, you gotta have access to water,
Yes.
or you ain't gonna have it,
Yes.
right? And then as you
Yes.
have
I
water,
learned that as well through studying history.
right? I mean, that's where it
Yeah.
starts. You gotta have water, right? And then populations grouped around water, and then as they grew, right, they created commerce and trade and an economy, and the cities became the magnets that attracted people from the outskirts into the city if you wanted to have access to more opportunity. And Guam is no different. After World War II, you saw a huge outflow of Chamorros and Guamanians, primarily to almost exclusively to the United States. And many of them were there because of greater economic opportunity. So the Central Business District of Guam was the United States of America. And people, I mean, my dad would tell the story. He went and got educated there. Many, a huge majority of our elected, appointed, and just community leadership, they went off to school, but they went off to the United States of America. They took a 2-week boat
Yes.
ride to Hawaii and another 1-week boat ride to San Francisco. And my dad would tell the story of the Archbishop Baumgartner right after World War II, went to a lot of prominent families and encouraged them, and then set up a way for them to go to St. Thomas University in Minnesota, a Catholic university. Why? This is a Catholic community, and this was an archbishop was from Minnesota, and he sent these young people from prominent families. They put their pennies together, and they sent them to go to school in, of all places, Minnesota, right?
I
And
really appreciate that background because I didn't understand where that connection came from
yeah,
of
well, and my dad,
that particular school in Minnesota.
yeah, and there's a St. Catherine's right next to it, and like former delegate and former Lieutenant Governor Madeline Verdaga, that's where she went.
Yes.
But her family came out here, so families from the mainland that came out here came out. Many of them came out as teachers. Many of them came out to support the federal presence because the local people were still learning the skill sets, and then they ran off and got educated. But my dad told a great story where they finally get to San Francisco. These young Romanians, the best and the brightest, they get there and they hail a cab. And they said, take us to Minnesota. Their sense of distance, right? Their sense of distance and space. I mean, we all sit here going, God, we got to drive to Yamatic, or we got to drive to Gigo. Gee, what a long drive, right? And yet, all of us that have spent any time in the mainland or anywhere just go, hey, we're 20 minutes away from everything. But their
That's
perception at the
right.
time was Minnesota must be a cab ride away. The cab driver took them to a Greyhound bus station, and that's when they learned how big the United States of America really can be. There really was. And they took a bus to Minnesota and off they went. And many of them came home and helped start, the help to modernize and innovate on Guam. They were lawyers, they were educators, they were engineers, and they went off to school and then came home and began to apply their knowledge to bring innovation from where they learned to where they lived. And then once that seed was planted, you see us benefiting from the innovations that emerge in the planet.
You think those folks were motivated to bring those innovations back, that they knew that they were serving a purpose bigger than themselves or higher than their own individual interests? Did they feel that, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think you can go into public service unless you feel that you want to contribute to a bigger part of the community through public service. Not that being in the private sector is not contributing, but if you choose to go into government and public service, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what government is, public service, right? And the sense that yeah, if you educate your community, if you keep them safe, if you provide for their health, right?
Right.
That when every candidate runs for office, those are the big three, right? education,
Right.
healthcare, and safety, right? Those never change.
Yes.
But how do you do that? And how do you, and then again, it's not so much events that I controlled events, Lincoln, right? But they controlled me. The
Yes.
island got attacked by involved in a war they didn't start. They were occupied by an enemy they didn't know was the enemy at the time until they came over and were bad people to Guam, the people of Guam, and then they were liberated by the United States thereafter. And so there's a perfect example of events beyond your control that come into your community and change your way of life. Because World War II changed Guam, but it really created. When you look at the list of people, the peers of my grandfather and the peers of my father, they really did some heavy lifting, and sometimes, and I get it, but sometimes we think the problems of today, are especially with our elected officials, elected leadership, the problems of today are so overwhelming, and yet when you think back, what had to be done prior to you being a governor or a senator or a representative
Right.
or a business person, what had to
Right.
happen before we showed up. It's amazing what Guam was able to do for itself, and the leadership of Guam was able to do for itself. But it really started. I mean, to me, the two most basic, uh, the most fundamental aspects of Guam that I think motivates the people is faith, right? Hugely strong faith based here, especially Catholic based, right?
Mhm.
And the sense that this is your community, right? And who else is going to fix it, right? And so you have people, the cream rises to the top type of thing. You have people, my grandfather got back then, how we say, hey, well, I'm going to go online and take this course. He participated in it wasn't online, it was through mail and I pretty much through the mail, but he got some education from Ohio State University back in the 20s. But that was that. But he aspired to do that, and and then he had a lot of peers that said, "Hey, let's build some schools here. We got to educate our people," and they saw the value of education. And as we know, that's not a Guam thing. That's sort of a human thing. Humans
Right.
obviously see that it's good to become educated, and then you pass on that education and that knowledge and those innovations to you hand it off at some point, and the person that succeeds you or the generation that succeeds you then takes it to the next level, and 100 years from now we're not going to recognize the Guam of 100 years from now. It's going to be very
Right.
different than what it is now.
So, so as we go to that, that's a good transition. Can you talk about what you see as kind of the challenges that Guam's educational system needs to meet to take us to kind of that future where Guam could be a 21st century tech and innovation hub? And, the thoughts about integrating more STEM, vocational training, and entrepreneurship into Guam's public uh, education curriculum.
I think generally speaking, despite its imperfections, right? And we got to remember, we're human, we're imperfect. I chuckle with all my years in public service, elected public service, how we tend to expect everyone else to be 100% perfect, even though we're not, right?
Right.
So, we want the schools to be perfect. We want to be perfectly safe. We want full employment. I tease every governor because I've now served with 5 of them, I think. I said, don't worry about the utilities. You can work on world peace, right? So everybody wants world peace, but achieving world peace ain't easy, right? And so the key was that getting the education going. You got a lot of very intelligent young people here that, despite the imperfections of the educational system, are still able to get. They're smart enough and capable enough and resourceful enough to get an education, whether it's public or private, and some teacher lights that fire within them that may have already been naturally burning, but make it glow brighter to go
Right.
and make their lives better. Go learn more. Go do more. The kids today of Guam they can do whatever they want, right? And we're starting to see, those that stay in Guam and those that leave Guam and end up in every industry possible. There's Guamanian educated engineers in the United States. I don't know if we've had an astronaut, but we pretty much have had every other job I can think of, except for maybe an astronaut and a president of the United States, right? But other than that, we've even had members of Congress. So
Yeah.
The human potential that exists in all of us, right? It needs the nurturing, it needs the fuel, and it needs the opportunity and the recognition of the individual that there is an opportunity in front of them and grab it and go do something, right? That's the people that make things happen versus saying what happened, or people want it to happen to them, right? But that's a tough way to live life. Is you're just kind of waiting for life to walk in and educate you, employ you, provide you a house. Life, you got to put some sweat equity into that as well, right? It's not just handed to you, right?
Think that Do you think that the young people of today kind of have the same kind of focus of it being bigger than themselves, i.e., if the best and the brightest on island get educated and stuff like that, do you think it's the same kind of motivation to come back and share that education and those thoughts and expertise with the island to make the island better? Or is it more like, I don't have any opportunities here on the island. I need to, because I'm so well educated and I have these talents, I got to go somewhere where I can use them, which is somewhere back in the States or Europe or somewhere off of the island.
Well, yeah, it's tough to make generalizations, right? Um, the people that have chosen to make Guam their home with original roots, multi-generational roots on Guam, we've been the ones that have changed Guam into where we are today, for better or for worse. And those that left Guam and moved to San Diego or Washington D.C., you find that they're very capable people. I have dear friends that are in the airline business, that are high ranking in the military, like your career. They can be successful. So and they have been successful. But why are you there versus here? Is There's a lot of reasons why some people stay. I mean, I was blessed with an excellent education. I could have stayed in the mainland, but I always knew I was going to come home. But that had more to do with me and my upbringing and what I wanted to do. And everyone that has chosen to remain on Guam and keep it their home is because they love living here, right? I love visiting the mainland. I love visiting Asia. I was lucky to my father was able to take us around the many parts of the world to live in, but I came back for high school and then I went to college and I went straight through. In 6 years, I had my master's, but I always knew I was going to come back to Guam. Why? Because my grandfather was a contributor to this community as an educator. My father was, my uncles and aunts were, and I studied specifically to come back to Guam. But that's just my story, right? I mean, others, leave Guam because at the end of the day, people vote with their wallet, and when there is more economic activity, so you go to where there is economic activity that you like, and for the first time in decades, Guam's population saw a decrease. And I follow the census and all that. And so,
Correct.
that's a sign. Okay, there was some changes, enough changes in Guam that we saw out migration rather than in migration, right?
Right.
Or net out migration, net immigration. So that's the first population decline. So I think that to me is a little concerning, that people have felt they don't have the opportunities here that they do elsewhere. But
Right.
you're right. But I also meet a lot of people when I do go to the mainland and meet people from Guam. They miss Guam, right? And I always joke about how many hours do you spend in commuting in the mainland to and from anywhere, right? Versus here, in 25 minutes, you can be anywhere, right? And if you think of 2 hours in traffic going to work, 2 hours coming coming home. That's 20 hours a week. You're just in a car, go or in some level form of transportation, just going to and from the place that helps you feed your family. Versus us, we have more time to do other things because we don't need to spend 20 hours a week commuting, right? But there's
Right.
more to do in other places than here.
But one
So
would
every
argue,
place has trade-offs. Every place has a trade-off, and it's kind of how you make those trade-offs.
but
That
one would argue that in today's economy, that there just isn't the same kind of opportunities for young people of Guam to raise their family and to make a decent wage, which is forcing them, particularly if they have talent and they have a good education, it's like forcing them to go leave the island, even though they don't necessarily need to do that. Would you kind of agree with that? Because you noted the population decline that's been going on for the last few years.
I think, like many things, it goes in cycles, right? And there was huge outmigration after the war, for reasons we've chatted about, more opportunity, whether it's education or economic, right? And then, but we grew to 180,000 people at one point, right? So there was more opportunity that attracted enough people. But I think we overestimate the impact of like COVID. I mean, COVID it changed the whole planet. It shut down the world. So a lot of the quote opportunity got lost. When you look on the data for Guam, we lost 20,000 jobs, but most of them were in tourism, right? So there was opportunity, but
Right.
when COVID says you can't fly anywhere, that whole industry got kicked in the dog, and that's the bulk of the jobs that were lost. They were in the service and tourism industry. Now, and yet 5 years ago we were setting records,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so it's like so that's the cycle. I use the comparison, when Michael Jordan tried to be a baseball player, right? And he realized for a baseball player he was an excellent jump shooter, right? But he sure as hell couldn't play baseball. And we're wrestling now with trying to get tourism to recover. I just came from a meeting, and we've been doing tourism for 50 plus years, and we were setting records just 5 years ago. So do we quit tourism and go play baseball? That's not what we're good at tourism. But we have to do some things to maintain our competitiveness in tourism. But when I hear people say, we should abandon tourism, I'm reminded of, yeah, that's Michael Jordan saying I should go play baseball. And you realize, no, you do what you're good at, and you deal with the ups and the downs and the innovations. How do we attract visitors now? How do they book their room now? I just came from a meeting of tourism leaders, and the whole discussion, about how do you get the modern visitor to come to Guam? And it's more
Yeah.
difficult, it's more competitive now because it's so much easier for the visitor to say, I want to go to Asia, I want to go to the United States, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to Australia, or I want to go to Guam. So the whole planet is much more competitive. And airline travel changed everything. The fact that within 24 hours, you can be anywhere in the planet due to airline travel versus taking a ship that takes forever, right?
Right. Right.
They talk about the automobile, right? And they talk about the industrial revolution that changed from an agrarian society, largely agrarian society. So, technology is a big mover because when you find it simpler to move something or do something, using innovation and technology, like the fear of AI. At one level, you're fearful of it, but at another level, as I try to learn more, because I'm an older folk that ain't gonna will be less exposed to AI than my grandchildren who they live in the middle of it, right? The commentary that I tend to appreciate is it's not going to eliminate human beings. Human beings are going to learn to use AI to be more productive, right? And so there may, on the one hand, there may be a job loss from a current type of job, but it may lead, and it probably will lead to a different kind of job in the future, using the latest innovations and the latest technologies to allow you to do things more efficiently that used to be less efficient with older technologies or with no technology. right? And
Yeah. So
that's just mankind evolving.
I think one of the things that Guam does have to recognize, though, is that the tourism landscape has significantly and fundamentally changed in the last 5 years. And it's not the same, and it's going to require, some really huge work, some really strong creativity and innovation to get back to that level. It's not just an automatic thing because now we're out of COVID that those levels are going to be achieved again. I think it's going to take some significant work there, which is also one of the reasons why I continue to beat this drum of the opportunity to open up cottage industries for defense sustainment as an opportunity forward, with a lot of things moving forward with different things at the policy level, Pentagon, White House, Indo-PACOM. We have an opportunity to take advantage of that and grow through these sustainment related cottage industries rather than constantly feeling like the only option we have um, is tourism, and that tourism is always going to be there and be our money maker.
Yeah, I mean, I think tourism will. Oh, I think tourism will be here will be one of the things we'll sell the planet for many years to come, right? We're the Caribbean of Asia, right? And I went on a river cruise in Europe last year, and it was the first time my wife and I had done a river cruise, and we went to part of Europe we hadn't been to, right? And but the fact that we could just jump on a river cruise today, that my dad and mom had, would have cost gazillions, right? And it was less available. Um, the world has become much smaller and more connected because of
Yeah.
just like this, because of innovations of technology, and
Yes.
and that's not going to change. That's not going to change. No, I mean, mankind has been reinventing itself since Adam and Eve, if you believe that myth, right?
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, let me steer the conversation to a new topic. Let's shift to infrastructure. You served on the Utilities Commission for a really significant amount of time. Can you kind of similar what you did with the education, Guam's education system? Can you kind of look back on kind of the major milestones in Guam's utility development that got us from, there to where we are right now? And then we'll turn the conversation to where do we need to go or what opportunities are out there with Guam's utilities system.
Well, I think like all communities, right? Again, first you had to have water, right? No matter where you're at, and the government, the island of Guam, which later morphed into the government of Guam, realized, hey, we got to find a way to provide water and take away waste from all of our citizens, and when we looked at other places and the way it was organized, right? Uh, then we began to learn about, and we sent, I think you interviewed John Beneventi, and we sent people like John off to get an education, and he came back and said, hey, here's a better way to make energy, right? But we were a carbon-based energy provider until renewables emerged. Everyone was just burning carbon, and then someone figured out nuclear, right? And then renewables have come on the landscape, but you can't put a nuclear plant everywhere, and renewables, some are very land intensive, and when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine, you don't have power. And when we were much younger, that saying, I want my MTV, well, now it's I want my energy. And everything we do requires energy. In fact, in the power and the water business,
Yeah.
when there's a typhoon, there's always that discussion, well, which is more important, water or power? Well, water is more important, but if you don't have the power to get the water to your house,
Water there. Yeah.
away from you, then you're going to say, I really want that energy, right? I want
That's
my
right.
energy. I don't want And, in all my years, when the power goes out, my WhatsApp goes out, my phones go off, it's instant, right? People are,
Yes.
we become slaves of energy, right? Versus just sitting in the backyard and enjoying the breeze, right? And now I got on my phone, oh, the power's out. Oh my God, my life's gonna end, you know? God, it's been 20 minutes, It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. There was a time there was no regular power here on Guam. So, I mean, that's just part of modern society, uh, seeing the innovation and then adapting it and adopting it, and sometimes adapting it to fit your environment. You can put a
So
nuclear plant in a large country. Right now, for the cost, you can't put it in Guam. It's too expensive because we're too small. So you got economies of scale. You've got a great phrase came out of the buildup that we're still undergoing, and it was that phrase, the tyranny of distance. That's what
yes,
we suffer from, the tyranny of distance, right? Uh,
yes.
and yet, if you're in Kansas, it's still a long drive to San Francisco or New York, right? So, that everyone has some level of tyranny of, right? And then people who are living in big cities, leaving big cities to go to smaller places because maybe it's safer. Maybe they don't want to live around 8 million people, 10 million people. And I always chuckle in terms of perspective. We go, wow, LA is a big city, New York's a big city. The Asian cities have us clobbered. They got 20, 30 million people crammed into much smaller spaces. Whereas in America, we can have a house, we can have a big house, right? If you have the money for it. But, we're spread, we have a population spread out over much larger areas. Whereas in Asia and in Europe, you have the same population, but it's all crammed into much smaller spaces, right? And the density, right? And so some people enjoy Guam because they don't want to live in the density. They don't want to live in 100 people per square mile, right? It's that's not good either, even though there may be quote opportunities, right? So it's kind of like you seek the opportunity that fits you, right? And yeah, Guam has gone through population surges and population fallbacks, but will Guam be here 100 years from now? I think so, assuming somebody doesn't blow up, two people don't decide to blow each other up, right? And
Right.
or some planetary catastrophe that none of us can control, right?
So so when you look at Guam's utilities, what innovations in water, wastewater, and power systems are you most excited about right now?
Well, on the power side, it's the fact that we now are able to blend the technology of burning carbon, which has been the main way to create energy, and the newer technologies of renewable energy. When you're in 14 degrees north latitude, you should be looking at solar. You're getting the most sun of anybody on the planet, right? You're right next to the equator, right? And so we've blended those, but we've also learned, because we're in an isolated grid, right? Whereas in America, you can get power made in New Jersey, sent down to Virginia, right? But we can't do that. So the idea of redundancy, we have to have much more redundancy in an isolated grid than you would in the middle of America, right? Because you can import energy from other places, right? And just
Right.
buy the energy. And yet we have to be able to create our own energy. And so some of the why is it costs more? Because we can't spread the base cost of energy across a large population, right? So we lose the economies of scale. Plus, we have the tyranny of distance. We got to bring, when we do burn oil, we got to bring it from Singapore. Why Singapore? Because if you bring it from Texas, it's even more expensive because of the freight. Because we are much further from Texas refineries than we are from Singapore refineries.
Singapore refineries.
Even
Yeah.
as you know, even the Department of Defense buys its refined fuel from Singapore and brings it in, right? They don't,
Right.
right? So, and that's that. But that's just the environment in which you live. We happen to live we are a long way from many places, but it's still, Guam has been populated for thousands of years. So Guam is still proven to be attractive enough to humans to be here for thousands of years, and they found some way to feed their families and live their lives and sustain a population on Guam for thousands of years, and which so that's why I'm pretty confident Guam will still be here 100 years from now, 500 years from now. The governance may be different. You know, it took the 13 colonies 150 years to say, now I want to be independent, right? And then they pursued it. Who knows? Maybe 100 years from now, 150 years from now, the people of Guam will say, I don't want to be a U.S. colony. I want to be a state, or I want to be independent. You know, that's for those decisions to be made. Will be long gone and forgotten. But I don't. You know, history tells me that, you know, those things can happen in any community. You know, how does a community evolve, right? And it is education, access to information, access to resources, right? And now we're able to, we humans have figured out a way to provide resources to every corner of the planet. It may cost a little more or a little less, but I'm sure there's an iPhone in Antarctica, or you know, and I'm sure there's some in the most remote parts of the world. You know, there's technology there, right? So I have a
Yeah,
lot
so
of
let's
faith. I have a lot of faith in the human race to continue to sustain itself. Although some mornings you wake up and you're going, "What the heck are we doing to each other?"
yeah, so you talked about renewables, right? And that complementing, burning fossil fuels and whatnot. Kind of how do you assess the current state of the renewables market here in Guam, particularly in line with the governor's 2035 mandates and stuff to reach certain goals and certain targets? Do you see a lot of problems with getting there? Do you think we're going to get there in advance? What opportunities as well as issues do you see in moving in
Well,
that direction?
yes, a great question. So the whole planet for now has picked 2045 to be 100% renewable, right? That's a common goal across the globe. When you look at the governments and the population saying, what is our energy goal? And the most popular ones is to be 100% renewable by 2045, right? And in the case of GPA, I mean, when we've just put out a bid for about 300 megawatts of more solar, and because of technology, we have a new power plant that provides the same amount of energy, but uses 1/3 less fuel. You know, we burn 3 million barrels a year. Ukadu will knock off 1 million barrels a year of fuel. And
Yes,
the golden energy is reliable energy at the lowest cost, right?
yes,
And for the cost, Ukadu is going to be you're going to be able to pay for the new Ukadu plant. It's a public-private partnership, which is a very important evolution here on Guam that I think we can use to solve other problems. But right now, we have a partner, a consortium and a partner, and that partner provides 1/3 of the power in South Korea. And they have a plant in Israel, and they have a plant in Mississippi. Part of their business is to go around the planet and provide energy solutions to whomever they can convince to hire them, right?
yeah,
And they take on the risk, right? And then we're going to buy this plant over 25 years from them, and then we'll own it. But we've done GPA was the first one to really pioneer the PPPs, you know, public-private partnership. And now we
yes,
actually have completed some of them where we now own the plant, but we still have a private company running it for us. And one of our challenges at GPA is, you know, we're an aging workforce. How do we do that? But I remember when I first joined the commission 20 plus years ago, and I told John Benavente and Joaquin Flores, two really great energy pioneers. I said, you know, we may not need to own any generation 25 years from now, because ultimately GPA is we just need to access energy, whether we make it or we buy it from somebody who makes it for us. And then we distribute the energy. And under President Obama, we won a grant to put smart grid into the system. And so now
yeah,
GPA can see the amount of energy coming into Guam dry cleaners, coming into your house. They can see it right now. They know when an outage occurs because they've innovated with technology to invest in smart grid, which has tied everybody into basically a big computer, energy computer at Guam Power Authority that then can direct the energy, can turn on, turn off, can know when there's a problem. And that's something, I've been there 20 plus years. And then before that, I was on the PUC, in the 80s, you'd have to go drive a truck out there to see what happens. Now, you know who's out immediately, and then you can marshal resources far more quickly, and then you can then reduce the time of outages. And so, I mean, that to me, the smart grid is an excellent example of how technology has changed the way power is distributed, right? And renewables has changed the way power is generated. And then conventional generation has gotten even more efficient in producing conventional energy. And now there's hydrogen, there's nuclear, and there may be. I think nuclear will become the energy source of the future for most of the planet. Especially once the economies of scale get better. I mean, you can stick a nuclear reactor in a submarine, so you can get it that small. But the Department of Defense can afford to put in a submarine. Mrs. Cruz and Mr. Tenorio can't afford to put it in Dededo yet, right? And so we stay conventional, but we're now blending in.
So do you?
Renewables.
Sorry to interrupt, but you talked about it being controversial right now and maybe not applicable to Guam. But do you see a possible future for small modular reactors or some kind of other advanced nuclear device that could be employed here on Guam to provide power?
Absolutely. The only reason we don't do it is the economies of scale. It's still too expensive, right? I mean, the Department of Defense can afford to put one of those in a submarine because they're the Department of Defense. But the average citizen here, when you look at the cost per megawatt hour to create the energy with a small modular nuclear plant, it's still too expensive for 160,000 people. It's not too expensive for 5 million people, right? But but to me, that's only going to come down. And there may be other energy innovations, and hydrogen is the new, hey, let's try that one. And I think something will emerge with hydrogen. So I think the provision of energy globally, and then therefore on Guam, 50 years from now, there'll be I mean, to me, I've always said we've started the paradigm shift. We now don't make 100% of our energy with carbon. We now are using solar. Wind is still not most reliable enough for the cost, and people are afraid of typhoons. So, when we put out these energy bids for GPA, it's technology neutral. You can bid whatever you want, but every private partner that has bid on energy has said, I'll do solar. I won't propose nuclear because it's too expensive. You guys can't afford it, right? And I won't do wind because typhoons can knock me out of business, with one bad typhoon. But solar, sun comes up, 14 degrees north latitude, unless God quenches the sun or moves Guam, that you can count on that, right? There's going to be sunshine.
Can you talk about the wind piece of it? Because I even asked John Benavente about this, and I wanted to hear kind of your thoughts or perspective on it. A lot of people, laymen, look at Guam and look at the trade winds that we have here and how we seem to have a consistent breeze, and of course during the season of the trade winds it's even stronger. Why couldn't we have a viable wind generated energy component here on Guam, given what you see as consistent wind and breeze?
Well, one, our wind isn't, I mean, it's consistent, but it's not, when you look at the places that do have a lot of wind, we're not that consistent, right? And again, you need enough wind, kind of like you need enough sun to be solar, right? You don't see a lot of solar plants way to the north because the sun don't shine that long, right? So you kind of have to take, in football, right? You take what the defense gives you. So given where we're at, right? I'm with John B. that you never send, we've learned, you never send a boat out with just one engine. So we're not 100%, we're not just 100% carbon. We now are bringing in solar. Why? Because it's cheaper than fuel, right? And so, and the fuel is 2/3 of your bill. If you don't attack 2/3 of your bill, you ain't gonna lower that power bill. But you have to have reliability. Remember, I said reliable energy at the lowest cost. Wind's not reliable. People want 24/7 power, not just when the wind blows, because when the wind doesn't blow, they call GP and say, hey, I want my energy, right? When the sun goes
Yeah,
down, you better have Ukudu when the sun goes down, because you're not gonna get anything out of solar. Now,
that's right.
you're getting batteries, and batteries is a great example of innovation. Once we learn to generate power with renewables, how do we store the power for when we
Store the
need it?
power.
Right, so now,
Yeah,
now you're seeing batteries, and but the batteries are expensive, and they only last 4 hours. Well, now they're starting to last 6 hours. Now they're starting to last 12 hours, and the cost is coming down through innovation.
right.
Smart people are figuring this out, how to drive down that cost while improving reliability, so that, someday, your watch is like this. And the Apollo astronauts would have said, man, I wish I had this much technology when I went to the moon. Right? And so, I mean, I think you're going in the right, life's a marathon. You don't get there in the first mile, and you got to
Yes,
keep putting one foot in front of the other, and
yes.
then life's a relay. At some point, I want to hand off to my successors utilities that are better today than they were when I stepped in. And then we have come a long way. And on the wastewater and the water side, I mean, we meet the Safe Drinking Water Act. Now, some people say, well, sometimes my water is brown, well, and it may be, but one, you could probably still drink the water, but that's a distribution issue. When we bring the water out from the 110 wells, just like us or DOD, and you're familiar with DOD, right? EPA's
Yes.
got all the standards that you have to meet for safe drinking water. I got a good friend that runs Pepsi. Even for private sector, the water that they bring up from Guam to sell to Mrs. Bruce, it's got to meet these very exacting standards, and you have to be able to
Yes.
show it and prove it. All right, and so we comply with the Clean Water, with the Safe Drinking Water Act, and then we were sending raw sewage into the ocean 25 years ago when I decided to pursue this interest. And today, all of our plants except one are now secondary treatment plants. They meet the highest standard required by US EPA. The one plant that's left is the one in Agania, and that's meeting at least advanced primary treatment, which is one level before secondary treatment. And our plan is to replace that plant like we have done in the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant. And we didn't replace it, but one of the benefits of the buildup was I was chairman at the time, and the buildup was just starting. And it was going to be $30 billion starting in 2008, and it'd be done by 2020, right?
Mhm.
Well, Camp Lodge is just getting done, right? And it's turning
Right.
out to be more like 40 or $50 billion. That's going to be done by 2035, right? But one of the things we said was Japan had money in the game, DOD had money in the game, and they thought of building their own wastewater treatment plant just for Camp Loss. But Anderson Air Force Base was already giving their wastewater to us at PUAG at the time, now GWA. They didn't build a separate wastewater plant. They gave it to the civilian community, right? And the largest
Right.
villages are up north. So that's why the largest wastewater treatment plant is up north. So when Camp Lodge was being built, they said, hey, we'll put in our own plant. And I said, hey, you're 2 miles away from our plant. Why would you run a little wastewater treatment plant just for a base, right? Let's work together. You help us expand and upgrade our plant to make US EPA happy and make sure we're no longer sending raw sewage into the ocean. And then you connect Camp Blas to it, but you also benefit the people of Guam and the northern half of Guam, which is where their wastewater goes, right?
Yes.
And it became a partnership. And I teased them, when you develop a house in the mainland or even here, there's a system development charge. The concept is when you build 1,000 houses, they're going to have impact on the system, and you have to make the system bigger. So you charge
Correct.
individuals the system development charge. And I told DOD that the $170 million that we need you to put into the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant, think of that as your system development charge for Camp Bloss. But that's what they did. They put in $170 million. We brought that plant to full secondary treatment at no cost to the people of Guam. DOD footed the whole tab because it was in their interest. They had the money, right? And they realized that synergy, that kind of decision, was going to make it better for everybody living on Guam, and they were wise enough to do it. And we got the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant upgraded at no cost to our people, and it now serves a benefit to the DoD. It's helping Anderson and Camp Loss, do their job and handle their waste. And that's a great example of working together, different parties working together, and then raising the level of technology for wastewater treatment, so that we would, unfortunately, we humans have to send the waste somewhere, and dilution is the solution, and the oceans is the best place to dilute. I mean, that's where all wastewater ends up, into the ocean, right? It doesn't matter what city you're on; it comes down a river and ends up in an ocean. You live on an island, it ends up in an ocean, right?
Yeah.
So, and one day we got to arrange where you go look at the wastewater plant. So there's a wastewater plant in Agate, $70 million plant that wasn't there 22 years ago, but we got one now because the people of Guam have grown to a level and created enough waste water that we need to be able to process it. So we've got, upgraded plants. I'm very proud of GWA. It's been about $1 billion of infrastructure in the 22 years I've been there. And we got a third of it from grants and 2/3 of it from rate increases. And then GPA is approaching $2 billion when you count the Ukudu plants, you count the solar farms that we have down in Talafofo and up in Manilao. So in the last 22 years, I've been able to participate and help bring to Guam about $3 billion worth of infrastructure. We've had to raise rates. We've also got grants, but when Ukudu fully opens, we will have retired, 50-year-old plants that, they kept us alive for a long time, but they need to be retired. And the new plant is more energy efficient, more reliable, right? And we're in a better place in terms of energy now than we were 20 plus years ago.
Thank you for sharing all of that background on that, particularly that success story of cooperation between the military and Guam in order to upgrade the northern plant. That's a great example there. So I asked John Benavente about this. What do you think about new experimental technologies like water temperature
Okay.
differentials, as
Yeah.
well as water surge
Okay.
capacities?
So OTEC's been around for 30, 40 years, and Hawaii even tried it, and now the OTEC plant is used for aquaculture because in terms of making energy, it was nowhere near cost effective. It's an interesting. It's the science, we get it, but at scale, it's never worked anywhere that I'm aware of, or if it is, it's a very small scale. But
A
again, that's
production
still
issue or a distribution issue?
no, the amount of energy it can create is not. I mean, in terms of the amount of energy you need to provide the community, it doesn't make enough energy per dollar. It doesn't make it cheaper than the other sources of energy. And Hawaii had the first experimental plant funded by the federal government, and 20 years later, that plant's not making energy. It's making highly clean water for aquaculture. And maybe there's some things you can do with pharmaceuticals with that highly clean water, but it ain't making electricity. So to me, OTEC's not. I'm with you that there are energy innovations out there, but OTEC ain't one of them. We've been there, done that. The Big Island, our sister island, tried it. They're not even making energy with it. They're making shrimp.
What about the underwater turbines that take advantage of the surge? And in fact, I heard about one initiative that was done on the north end of the island where you got that strong current coming in between us and Rota, and just having a one-way kind of turbine underwater there, and then using that strong current that blows between the islands of Guam and Rota to be able to produce power from that.
Yeah, and again, so I have, I've been blessed to work with people like John Beneventi. We've got some excellent people at GPA, and we've had uh, um, the U.S. Renewable Energy Labs. We've had a lot of good people exchange information. At the end of the day, is yeah, what you can make energy with that, but can you make it affordably? Right? So just because you can make the energy with flow doesn't mean that you will. I mean, when you think about how many communities do it with ocean currents, right? Very
Yeah,
few. Most are burning carbon, building a nuclear plant, or building a wind farm or a solar farm. On the list of how you make energy on the planet, what percentage comes from ocean power, ocean flow? Pretty small. And it's often, in my experience, it's like people sometimes way overestimate what new technology, or hey, they do it over there, why can't we do it over here? I mean, the variables are very complex, and the same. One of the things I learned from John Beneventi and Ken Flores and Miguel Redayo is, it'd be nice to be on the leading edge, but you don't want to be on the bleeding edge. Let someone else figure it out. Let someone else figure it
I
out. Let
love
them
that.
perfect it, and then we'll see if we can work on Guam. But Guam's too small to take the risks. I mean, to go to ratepayers and say, "Hey, you want to spend $500 million seeing if we can do turbine power?" Maybe, maybe not, right? And that's just to see if it can happen. For 650 million, we know we can make power at Ukudu and reduce our fuel consumption by 1/3. So
Right.
that's a sure bet. And remember that all of our bids are technology neutral. So the people that know energy around the world, and we've had multinational bidders with tremendous capacity, when they bid on Guam, they only bid solar. Smart people, their money, they know all the technologies, but what did they bid on Guam? Solar. They could have bid, nobody's ever bid wind. No one's bid small modular nuclear, because they have to take the risk. They got to build it, sell us the power. Hopefully we'll pay it back. And of course, they've also got to be the lowest bid. And
Right.
economies of scale make it very difficult for Guam, with a small community and only 160,000, to benefit from economies of scale. We can't. Now you put a nuclear plant next to 20 million people, now you got economies of scale. But it's in an isolated grid, the tyranny of distance. Guam's a wonderful place, but some of the trade-offs is small, far away, but the nicest people in the world. So, kind of pick what you want to do.
Yeah. So great. Simon, this was an outstanding conversation. I really appreciate your insights, but more importantly, I appreciated your sense of history. I like the way that you kind of frame things of kind of where we've been and, what we had to do to get to where we are right now. It kind of puts things into perspective. You talk about difficulties or problems or challenges and stuff like that. If you frame it in the context of history, where we came from and what the people who came before you had to solve and overcome, it really puts things into perspective.
Well, my father, Dr. Pedro Sanchez, was Guam's first native-born historian, the first one to write the history of Guam. But he was from Guam. All the prior books were written by visitors, right? And I was a history major at Stanford, and because I've always, there's that saying, if those that don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it, right? And and,
Yes,
and
yes.
the best lessons taught come from prior experience. Now, the challenge
Yes.
for us human beings is, did you learn any lesson? And if you did, what did you learn, and what are you going to do with what you learned, right, to make it better?
Absolutely. So thank you for being a guest on the Innovate Guam podcast and sharing all of that history and perspective on Guam. To my audience, I hope you were inspired and learned something new today. Remember to follow me on all social media platforms, including Substack. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date on all future episodes. And don't forget to check out my Innovate column in the Pacific Daily News every first and third Friday of each month. See you next time. And remember, whether you're at home, at work, or at play, always innovate. Thank you.